I was perched by the window of my downtown apartment, the late afternoon sun spilling across my silk blouse, when my phone buzzed again. Another reminder of the life I had built and the one I had run from. I swiped it open. A message from my mother, short and sharp, exactly like she always was. "We're planning the trip. Are you coming?" My chest tightened. The last time I had tried to join a family trip, I'd been told flights were $7,450 each, and if I couldn't afford it, I should stay behind. Funny, then, how she'd somehow charged me $9,540 without explanation. That memory made my fingers tingle, hovering over the screen as if it might bite me if I touched it. I glanced around my apartment, the walls lined with framed sketches of my first gallery show, a stack of unopened mail, the faint aroma of coffee lingering in a chipped mug on the counter. Everything I had built screamed independence, yet this message forced me to revisit old wounds. Pride, resentment, and a pinch of ironic amusement tangled in my stomach. I took a slow breath, smoothing the silk over my wrist, feeling the texture under my fingers, grounding myself. I had learned long ago that I could survive them. But even now, part of me wondered what it would feel like to confront her, to finally say everything I'd kept bottled up for years. I remember the day clearly, though I wish I could forget it. I was 22, fresh out of college, and full of hope, or maybe foolish courage. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish, my mother's favorite, as she sat rigidly on the sofa, counting papers like they were weapons. "Flights are $7,450 each," she said, her voice sharp, almost clipped. "If you can't afford it, stay behind." I felt my chest tighten. My hands, clammy and small against the stack of acceptance letters I had just received from internships across the country, shook. I have some savings," I stammered, trying to sound confident. "I can cover part of it, maybe." She cut me off with a flick of her wrist. "No. If you don't have it all, you stay." End of discussion. The sting of dismissal was sudden, like a slap I hadn't seen coming. My father sat quietly in the corner, a shadow of agreement, while I felt invisible, like I was shrinking in the space that was supposed to be home. My throat tightened, a lump formed, and I swallowed hard, tasting the bitter tang of helplessness. I turned to my grandmother, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, and she gave me a look that said more than words ever could. She handed me a small, worn notebook. "Write it all down," she whispered. "One day, it will guide you." That simple act, a gift of faith, of belief in me, felt like a tiny spark in a dark room. For the first time, I realized that the only person who could truly stand by me was myself. By the end of that night, I had made a decision. I would find a way to survive, to thrive, without relying on approval or money from a family that didn't see my worth. I tucked the notebook into my bag, feeling the weight of its promise and the freedom of my choice. That night, the first real step toward independence was taken. It didn't feel like victory, it felt like survival. The notebook my grandmother had given me became my lifeline. I filled its pages with plans, sketches, and dreams that I didn't dare speak aloud. I worked 2 part-time jobs, stayed late at the library learning financial spreadsheets, and practiced my public speaking until my voice cracked. The world felt heavy, but for the first time, it felt like it could be mine. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried on the floor of my tiny studio apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if I had made a mistake. The bills piled up, the city felt overwhelming, and I often questioned whether I was strong enough to keep going. But every time doubt crept in, I opened that notebook and read my grandmother's words. "One day, it will guide you." Eventually, I found a mentor, a seasoned art gallery owner named Margaret, who saw potential in my sketches and my determination. She was a woman who had fought her own battles and knew how to nurture talent. Under her guidance, I started taking small commissions, learning not just to draw, but to sell my work, negotiate contracts, and present myself professionally. My first big breakthrough came unexpectedly. A local cafe agreed to display a series of my pieces, and one sold for triple what I had hoped. I felt the thrill of possibility, a rush that made all the sleepless nights worthwhile. Soon, I secured more clients, each success quietly building into a secret empire of self-made independence. I kept my family in the dark. They believed I was struggling, sending occasional postcards, posting vague updates on social media. Nothing that revealed the real progress I was making. I was no longer the girl who had been told to stay behind. I was becoming someone they couldn't recognize, and I liked it that way. The small wins became bigger. First gallery showing, first profitable commission, first investment in a tiny studio I could call my own. Each victory was a quiet rebellion, a silent declaration that I didn't need their approval or their money to thrive. And yet, despite the success, I carried the lessons from my grandmother with me. I remained careful, humble, and deliberate. Every decision, every risk, every triumph measured. Because I knew what it meant to be dismissed, to feel powerless, and I never wanted to return to that place. By the time I moved into a proper studio downtown, filled with sunlight and framed pieces of my own making, I had transformed completely. I had built a life that was invisible to them, yet strong enough to withstand any judgment. The girl who had been told to stay behind had quietly rewritten the rules, and she wasn't done yet. I hadn't seen my mother in years. Not properly. Not since she had made me feel invisible over a number on a ticket, over a price she deemed too high for me to exist. But today, she and my father were coming to my studio, expecting to find the struggling, uncertain young woman they had left behind. I greeted them at the door with a composed smile, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows bouncing off the polished hardwood. The walls were lined with my pieces, some bold, abstract strokes, others delicate, meticulous sketches. A sculpture I had labored over for months rested on a pedestal, catching the light just so. Every detail, every corner of this studio was a testament to the life I had built without them. They stepped inside, and I watched the disbelief cross their faces almost immediately. My mother's eyes flicked to the framed sketches along the walls, then to the small gallery of awards and press clippings I had carefully displayed. My father's jaw tightened as he noticed the sleek laptop open on my drafting table, spreadsheets of commissions and upcoming projects blinking quietly in the corner. I let them take it all in, let them breathe in the reality they hadn't anticipated. There was no rush, no apology needed, just observation, and the weight of surprise settling into the room like a tangible presence. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, but layered with every year of hurt and quiet determination. "This is my life," I said, gesturing around the studio. "Everything you thought I couldn't do, everything you said I wasn't capable of, I built it anyway. I've been financially independent for 5 years now. I own the studio. I own the rights to all my work. And yes, the flights? I paid my way. Every last cent." My mother's lips parted, a flicker of shame passing through her eyes before she pressed them together again. My father's face went pale, the realization of what they had underestimated dawning slowly. I could see the words they wanted to say, the excuses forming on their lips, but I held up a hand. "No," I said softly. "You can feel whatever you feel. Shock, guilt, amazement, it's fine. But I won't let the past define me anymore. I did this for me, not for your approval." They looked around again, absorbing the scale of what I had achieved, and I could almost hear the hum of their surprise echoing through the studio. The quiet satisfaction of being unseen, underestimated, and then revealed in full, tangible form was electric. For the first time, I felt the true weight of my independence, not in money, not in accolades, but in the simple fact that I no longer needed their validation to feel whole. They had expected a struggling girl, a cautionary tale. Instead, they met a woman who had quietly rewritten the rules on her own terms. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The power had shifted. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had earned the right to define my own life. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. My mother's gaze flicked to my hands, neatly folded in my lap, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. My father's silence spoke volumes, the the weight of realization settling on him like a stone. I finally leaned forward, letting my voice carry the calm authority I had cultivated over years of quiet struggle. "I'm willing to help," I said, "but only on my terms. Things can't go back to the way they were. If you want to be part of my life, there are conditions, boundaries that need to be respected." My mother's lips pressed together, an instinctive defense, while my father looked wary, unsure if he wanted to hear the terms. But I continued. "First, honesty. No more half-truths about finances. No more surprise charges or ultimatums. I need clarity, not control." I paused, letting it sink in. They nodded hesitantly, faces softening but still uncertain. "Second," I went on, "respect my independence. I will make my own decisions, financial, professional, personal. I'm not asking permission. I'm asking for acknowledgement." My grandmother's notebook came to mind, tucked in my bag for years, the symbol of faith in my own abilities. I leaned back, feeling the weight of my journey, and continued. "Third, personal growth. If you want to be involved, you must confront the parts of yourselves that caused harm. That means leaving toxic patterns behind, pursuing your own aspirations instead of imposing them on others, and learning to celebrate my successes instead of feeling threatened." Their faces were a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. My mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. My father's lips twitched as if forming the right words, but he remained silent, listening. "These aren't punishments," I said softly. "They're opportunities to heal, to reconnect without repeating old mistakes. I care about you, but I will not bend to the ways of the past. I've spent too long being diminished. That ends now." For the first time, the dynamic had shifted completely. I held the power, not in money alone, but in self-respect, clarity, and the ability to choose how they fit into my life. The girl who had once been dismissed, told to stay behind, was now the one setting the rules, defining the terms, and offering a hand only if they were willing to change. I watched them process it all, the initial discomfort giving way to reflection. It was a delicate dance, but I knew one thing with certainty. This was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about preserving my own strength while allowing them the chance to grow alongside me. The shift was palpable. For the first time, I felt the balance of power in my life resting firmly in my hands, and it was intoxicating. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and change began quietly. My mother started attending therapy, speaking openly about the patterns she had unconsciously repeated. She asked questions, not to control me, but to understand me. My father, slower to adjust, began volunteering at a local community center, channeling his energy into something meaningful beyond our old family dynamics. I watched them evolve with cautious hope, grateful but careful not to let old habits creep back in. It was remarkable, seeing people I had once felt powerless around now trying, in small but deliberate ways, to become better versions of themselves. And through it all, I remained firmly grounded in my own life, my studio, my commissions, my growth. One evening, I opened the old, worn notebook my grandmother had given me, the one that had first inspired my journey. Flipping through the pages, I traced the early sketches and frantic notes, remembering the fear, the doubt, and the sting of being dismissed. I smiled softly, the lines of struggle now transformed into evidence of resilience and triumph. That notebook, once a symbol of hope, had become a record of my independence, a testament to the woman I had become. I poured a cup of coffee, inhaling the familiar aroma, and glanced out the window at the city skyline. The sunlight hit the glass buildings in golden streaks, reminding me how far I had come, from the girl told to stay behind, to a woman commanding her own life. And in that quiet moment, I realized the truth I had carried all along. Independence isn't just financial or professional, it's emotional, it's self-respect, it's the ability to hold firm and still extend grace. I had survived the rejection, the dismissals, the ultimatums. I had turned them into strength, and now I could choose who and what belonged in my life. I closed the notebook gently, running my fingers over its worn cover, feeling the weight of its history and the power it represented. And I whispered to myself, a line that would forever define my journey. I am not behind anymore. I am exactly where I am meant to be.